Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make a really nice French baguettes at home. You will need some flour, some yeast, some fresh yeast I use here, some salt and some lukewarm water. The full recipe you will find in the info box just below. So we make some sort of pre-dough and we use half of the yeast, a little bit of the flour, we're gonna leave this dough for about 5 hours at room temperature and we mix it with the water. I do use all the water here. And this pre-dough we make so the dough can, while fermenting, develop lots of flavor, because the flavor in bread comes through long fermentation times. Normally you can leave a baguette for 24 hours to proof as well, or even more. So clean the sides of the bowl a little bit, because it's always important to work clean. Then we wrap it, or you can use a lid. Unfortunately I did not have a lid for this one, so I just used cling film. After about 4 hours at room temperature, the dough is really nice and bubbly. It does smell very nice. It just has a really nice smell to it. Now we start and use the rest of the yeast we kept before. You can use dry yeast as well. Just use about 1/3 of the weight that you would use in fresh yeast. We just crumble the fresh yeast in the flour. Then we mix in our pre-dough. For this recipe, right now you don't need any additional water, because we did use all the water for the pre-dough already. You could keep a little bit from the water just to clean out the bowl from the pre-dough. Now we mix everything together, just so it does just combine with all the flour. You could use a machine, of course, as well, like KitchenAid, for example, or any other kneading machine. But doing it by hands is no problem either. It's not too much work. Now we leave it covered again to rest for about 20 minutes. This will make it a lot easier to knead the dough later. And we leave out the salt for this process. Just don't forget to add the salt later, because otherwise you'll have a rather not tasty bread. Okay, after 20 minutes, now we actually start the whole kneading process. As I said before, you could use a machine for this as well. I quite like doing it by hand. So now we add the salt, so it doesn't disturb the fermentation process before. And now kneading, I do just try to rub it over the working surface. Just try to stretch the dough, which will develop the gluten structure in the dough, which is important later for the bread to develop the texture. So after 10 minutes, and it does take about 10 minutes, the dough is nice and stretchy. It hardly sticks anymore. As long as you always keep moving it, it doesn't stick. When you hold it by hands in your hand, it will stick a lot. You can make your hands a little wet. It won't stick. Then it will help with the stickiness. Okay, now we form a little ball. For this, we just stretch it always to the middle. Turn it outside and stretch it into the middle. This way, you get a nice elastic texture on the outside, which will later help with the proofing process. As you turn it in the middle, the outside will get nice elastic. It's a little bit like rubber. Like this, I'll leave it to proof again for about another hour. It always does depends on the temperature you have, always, of course. If it's in the winter time, it will take a little bit more. In the summertime, it does go a bit faster. So 1 hour is just about a guideline. If you have 10 degrees in your room temperature, it will take obviously a lot longer. Okay, after 1 hour, we start working the dough again. For that, I slightly flour the surface. This recipe is from my German channel. And in Germany, the flour we have is quite different than the flour you have, for example, in the UK or in the US. But I think all-purpose flour should work just fine with this. Just make sure you use a flour which has no yeast in it already. Okay, this way we're gonna portion it in 3 equal parts. Use a scale sword, so they're pretty much the same weight, because this way they will have the same cooking time in the oven later. So after I've portioned it, I make little packets out of it. This way I just fold it in the middle, turn it around, fold it in the middle again. This way I have nice little packages, which I will leave to rest for another 10 minutes. This way the dough can always relax, which is important, like have time for the dough to relax. This whole folding to the middle and stretching process is very important to shape the baguettes later, because if you don't do it, they won't rise equally and they might burst open in places where you don't want them to. So for all sorts of bread, this way of folding it is quite important, and it will bring your bread baking definitely to the next level. So we just cover those packages for another about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And now it's actually time for shaping the baguettes. And this whole shaping is quite important as well. So we press it a little flat. Don't press out all the air. Just slightly press it flat. And then we fold them like a roll. Then we do it again. And then we press the seam together with our wrist. And then we just shape nice baguettes. Make sure you don't make them too long so they still fit on your baking tray. This recipe I made for, like a conventional oven you have at home. So it does fit 3 little baguettes. And the whole shaping process is quite fun. I quite enjoy doing it. And you too will enjoy it, believe me. So you press it flat and then you just roll it a little bit. This is very important again for the whole rising of the bread. So you get nice and round baguettes. And when you put them on the tray, make sure you have the seam on the bottom. With a little practice you will get better and better. Okay, this is how they look like. I use a bit of flour on the tray. Later it does give a nice, much more rustic look if you use flour. So I'll leave them covered again to rest for another 45 minutes to 1 hour. In the meantime, I preheat the oven and I put a little tray of boiling water in the bottom. This is important to cook or to bake the baguettes, to use a little bit of steam in the beginning. So number 1, they will rise more equally, and number 2, the crust will become much better. So I preheat the oven to 250 degrees Celsius. In the bottom I will write down as well what temperature it is in Fahrenheit in the info box. So after 45 minutes, the baguettes have nearly doubled in size. I use a bit of flour again on top, which will give again a nice rustic look. And then you can use a nice sharp, very sharp knife to score the baguettes. You can use a razor blade as well if you have one. And then you put them in at the highest temperature, which is 250 degrees in my oven. 20 minutes with steam. After 20 minutes they do look like this, quite nice already. And then I take out the steam, turn down the temperature to about 200 degrees Celsius, and then bake them for another 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how good the crust is already. In this case it took another 5 minutes, and then I put them down on the rack to cool down before I cut them. Don't cut them hot. And there you are, your beautiful French baguettes, and it's actually quite easily made. So I hope you did enjoy the video, and if you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet, and you can of course recommend those videos and share them with your friends. And I'm looking forward to your comments down below, and see you next time. Bye bye.